King's Dominion is in trouble. At least that's what I talked about in a previous video. To sum it all up, their quality has declined, their new attractions are getting smaller, and they're constantly removing some of the best rides in the park, including the beloved Volcano, the Blast Coaster, the Crypt, and even Tornado. Their position in the Cedar Fair chain is constantly declining, with them changing positions with other parks. But to make matters much worse, when King's Dominion does add a new coaster, it isn't always very well received, resulting in an extremely minimal attendance increase. I talked about all this more in depth in a previous video, and I came to the conclusion that King's Dominion is indeed in trouble. The park itself is in danger of slipping even further down the Cedar Fair chain, which could result in even less coasters added to the park and a further decrease in quality. So in this video, we're going to discuss how King's Dominion can save itself and get out of the theme park depression that they might be in. We're going to go over all of the issues that are plaguing the park one by one and talk about likely solutions that the park could take, as well as other possibilities to make King's Dominion a thriving amusement park and make it Virginia's premier theme park. Now before I get started, let me just say I am definitely not ripping King's Dominion. I love King's Dominion and it's personally one of my favorite theme parks. However, with that being said, I encourage all of you to watch the previous video that I made called Is King's Dominion in Danger? Because it goes more in depth of what I'm talking about. That video addresses the problems of King's Dominion and this video is addressing how they can fix it. So without further ado, this is how King's Dominion can save itself. So King's Dominion is struggling, and it has been for quite some time. The park is struggling in three main ways: attractions, quality, and public image. All of these three things go hand in hand with each other, with one of them affecting the rest. So let's start off with quality. It's no secret that this park has some great quirks to it, but it's also no secret that the quality of this park has been declining over the past couple of years. For one, the theming in the park is extremely minimal and it's non-coherent with the rest of the park. Let me explain. I mean, you have a stunt coaster next to an alien attraction near a bobsled, which is all in close proximity to the jungle/safari section of the park. So this area of the park does not flow at all, and especially now that Volcano is removed, it's looking bare. Now to be honest, this isn't something new and has been like this for quite some time, but now that Volcano is gone, it shines light on the issue of coherence. Now this is an issue that I fully expect the park to work on, and in fact they are taking giant steps to try to fix this, but I'll talk about more of that in a little bit. Besides coherence, the quality of the park can occasionally just feel cheap, especially when compared to Busch Gardens Williamsburg next door. A perfect example of this is their Christmas event, Winterfest. Winterfest is a pretty great event. The experience is a great thing for the park, featuring a few rides, some shows, and some pretty good food. Overall, the event was and is a success. That is, if you don't compare it to Busch Gardens Williamsburg. In my opinion, Busch Gardens' Christmas town completely overshadows Winterfest. Their food, their rides, and their shows are clearly superior, leaving King's Dominion feeling cheaper, if you compare the two. And that is the theme that I feel like is repeated throughout King's Dominion. The fact is that certain aspects of the park are fine and pretty good on their own, but they feel lacking if you compare them to Busch Gardens. So how can King's Dominion fix this? So the way King's Dominion can quote-unquote save itself is to improve the overall quality of the park. I mean, that's obvious. Well, how specifically? They first of all need to improve the coherence of the Safari Village section of the park, which is to improve the food options there and to make the overall area just a theme section instead of a bunch of random rides just scattered around. And honestly, this is exactly what they are doing, so props to King's Dominion for this. As I'm sure all of you are aware, 2022 is going to be seeing the addition of Tumbili, a 4D free spin, as a replacement for the Crypt. However, that's not all King's Dominion is getting. They're also going to be receiving a complete upgrade to the Safari Village section of the park. They're going to be enhancing the theming and the overall appearance of this section of the park, and they're going to now be changing the name to Jungle Expedition. And from the looks of it, it looks to be a huge improvement of what's currently there. So it does look like King's Dominion is heading in the right direction, but what else can they do to improve the park for the long run? And for this, we need to look at the second major issue that is plaguing the park. And this is the fact that new ride additions generally don't perform as expected. We've all heard the infamous story of Intimidator 305 performing absolutely terribly, and even Twisted Timbers did not perform as expected, resulting in a non-noticeable increase in attendance. Basically, if the park realizes that a big coaster addition isn't worth it for the park, they might shift their focus elsewhere. And for coaster enthusiasts, this would not be a good thing. So how can Kings Dominion ensure that their future investments perform as expected? Obviously, there is no guaranteed solution, but I can definitely think of ways that give each attraction a better chance of performing great for the park. This is pretty self-explanatory, but the first way is marketing and advertising. Twisted Timbers is a fantastic ride, and it's currently my third favorite coaster of all time. And honestly, it should have performed much better in its initial year. The ride's doing great now, but in the first year it should have boosted attendance by a ton, so why didn't it? Well, this may sound absolutely crazy, but I don't believe that Kings Dominion advertised the attraction enough. I don't believe they created enough hype for the ride. In all my years in Virginia, I only remember ever seeing one commercial for the ride, and that was because I searched for it myself. In its opening years, I only ever remember seeing general Come to Kings Dominion ads, not ads for Twisted Timbers, the awesome RMC. I believe if Kings Dominion would have only advertised Twisted Timbers, or advertised Twisted Timbers a lot more than general ads, they would have received a lot more people coming into the park that year. I find this entire issue of the rides not performing as expected to be a very interesting concept. We'll have to wait and see for Tambili to see if it's going to perform well or not, but I do think they probably fixed this issue by now. The third and final thing that Kings Dominion needs to fix is their negative public image. I talked a lot about this in the previous video, so go check that out if you aren't too sure what I'm referring to. But basically, Kings Dominion's loyal clientele feel that they've been losing out lately when it comes to new additions, ride removals, and overall experience. Obviously, the first thing that comes to mind when you say ride removals is Volcano the Blast Coaster. Absolutely nobody wanted that ride to leave. Granted, it absolutely needed to go, but it was still a punch in the gut to all coaster enthusiasts and all Kings Dominion's fans who weren't expecting it to go. The second thing that comes to mind is the lack of water park additions for thrill seekers. Ever since Tornado was removed, we've been waiting patiently for a new slide to come to Soak City. Many of us were expecting that to come in 2020 to 2021, however all we got was Coconut Shores, yet another younger kid attraction. One thing that sets Kings Dominion apart from Busch Gardens Williamsburg is that the water park is included with admission. Kings Dominion should use this to their advantage, making it the best water park that they can. Some of my best memories are at the water park, so it would benefit everyone if they would add a new slide for adults once in a while. And one final thing that contributed to their negative image was their limited operation days last year, which I talked about in the last video. So how can Kings Dominion fix all of these problems? In order to improve their image, they need to change the public's perception about the park. And surprisingly, they're already on the right track with this, with the Jungle Expedition improvements. I'd say it would be a great idea for Kings Dominion to do this elsewhere in the park, by renovating and improving theming in certain sections of the park. And I 100% predict that this is going to happen again in the future. We first saw this when they rebranded the water park to Soak City, then they updated / restaged Candy Apple Grove, and now Jungle Expedition. This seems to be a pattern that the park is making, and it's at least an attempt to improve guest experiences in the long run. Another extremely obvious thing that the park can do is to replace Volcano as soon as possible, or most likely in 2024. I think this attraction can pretty much be anything, as long as it reaches two criteria. 1. It needs to be comparable to the original Volcano, meaning that the thrill level is relatively the same between the two. And secondly, it needs to have a good theme. I'm not talking exclusively about the set pieces on the ride, but the overall theme in general. The overall theme of the attraction should be good. Remember when we talked about the issue of coherence? This ride needs to fit with the theme of the section of the park. Now, what exactly should this mystery attraction be? Well, I don't know, but I think almost every major rumor and idea tossed around could potentially work great. An axis would be awesome, a launch infinity coaster would be really cool, and a wing coaster would be a perfect fit for the park. As long as the ride is a decent attraction and they don't decide to go super cheap, it's going to be great. And if it pays homage to Volcano, that's going to be even better. So to conclude, here are the 3 steps that I think the park needs to take in order to excel further in the amusement industry. Step 1. Improve coherence and quality by making Jungle Expedition a top-notch land, possibly one of the most themed areas in any Cedar Fair park. Step 2. Finally add a new thrill water slide to the park. And finally, make Volcano's replacement something super unique that can't be found at Busch Gardens. I'm talking about something so amazing that people come out of town just to ride this one ride. Something awesome for almost every thrill seeker to enjoy. Those are the steps that I think Kings Dominion needs to take in order to be headed in the right direction and compete better with Busch Gardens Williamsburg. But wait, how is Busch Gardens doing? Usually BGW is referred to as a theme park powerhouse. Are they still that way? Is guest experience really declining, as some people say it is? Is Busch Gardens really headed in the right direction? Well, find out soon on next week's episode of Park Analysis. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to see content just like this all the time, and comment below your thoughts on Kings Dominion, Busch Gardens, or basically anything that you're in the mood to say. This is the Kosher Josh signing out.